I met him first. I loved him first. But he married her, my best friend. I never thought a single wedding could break me this much. Not in a physical, obvious way, but in a quiet, soul-crushing kind of way that hollowed me out from the inside. It wasn't because I hated weddings. I adored them, the romance, the joy, the promise of forever, but because the man standing at the altar that day, the one with the expectant smile and the hopeful glint in his eyes, was supposed to be mine. He was supposed to be the man I walked toward, not the man I watched from a cold, silent pew near the back. A stranger in a room full of people who thought they were celebrating a love story. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 27 from Charleston, South Carolina, and this is the story of how I lost the love of my life. Not to a stranger, not to some random twist of fate, but to the one person I trusted with every single one of my secrets. To my best friend, Claire Matthews. From the outside, everything looked perfect. The laughter, the music, the scent of 1,000 white roses filling the air, a fragrance that now, even today, makes me feel a profound sense of sadness. Guests were clapping, smiling, their faces a sea of joy that felt like a deliberate taunt, a cruel performance for my benefit. But inside, I felt like I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt hollow, my chest a tight cage, my heart a piece of broken glass rattling inside. Because as the bride walked down the aisle in her white lace dress, glowing with a happiness so pure it felt like a lie, I realized she wasn't just anyone. She was my childhood best friend, the girl I had known since we were 5. The girl who had a key to my house, the girl who knew my deepest fears and wildest dreams, the girl I had stood beside for every major milestone in her life, and the man waiting for her, the man who once held my hand in the quiet, dusty library, the man who once said I was the most beautiful person he had ever seen, the man who promised me forever, that was Jason Miller. I met Jason first. That's what keeps replaying in my head, a constant looping film reel of a life that could have been. It's the single fact I cling to when the world feels like a lie. It was sophomore year of college. I was sitting alone in the library, drowning in essays, a half-empty coffee cup beside me, when this tall, messy-haired guy with a tired but kind smile sat down across from me and asked if I had an extra pen. That's how it started. That's all it was. A simple, mundane question. And from then on, we were inseparable. Study sessions turned into late-night coffee dates that bled into early mornings. We would sit in that quiet, dimly lit campus cafe, just talking for hours, the world outside melting away. Coffee dates turned into late night walks, where the streetlights painted the world in shades of orange, and we would talk for hours, sharing our fears and our hopes, our dreams and our insecurities. It was in those quiet, sacred spaces that I fell in love with him, with the way his eyes would crinkle when he laughed, with the way he would chew on the end of his pen when he was deep in thought. He was everything to me, and soon he was confessing things to me I thought he'd never say to anyone. The secret ambition he had, the one he was too afraid to tell his parents about, the fear he had of never living up to his own expectations, the deep-seated guilt he carried over his parents' divorce. And in those moments, in the raw vulnerability of our confessions, I fell in love with him, with everything in me. And I thought he loved me too. Every touch, every laugh, every late-night phone call. It all felt like a promise of a future we would build together, a future that was ours and ours alone. But here's the twist, the cruel, painful twist that changed everything. Claire met him through me. I introduced them at a party, a casual, simple gesture, a single sentence that, in retrospect, felt like I was handing over my entire future. At first, I was happy, genuinely, truly happy. The two people I cared about most in the world were getting along. I would watch them from across the room, relieved, content, seeing my two favorite people talking, laughing, connecting. But slowly, with a chilling sense of dread, I started to notice. I noticed the way she laughed harder at his jokes than she ever did at mine, a practiced musical sound that felt like a performance. I noticed the way he leaned closer to her when they talked, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur. I noticed their silent, shared smiles, the little inside jokes that I wasn't a part of. And the worst part, I brushed it off. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was being paranoid, that they were just friends. It was a lie I told myself every day, every single time I saw them together, because the truth was too painful to bear. The truth that they had a secret world I wasn't invited to, a world that was slowly, silently replacing the one I had with Jason. Until one night, Jason didn't answer my calls. I called him a dozen times. I texted him, nothing, no response. The silence on the other end of the line was louder than any screaming match. And later, the next morning, I found out why. He had been with her. The quiet, suffocating truth of it hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole my breath and left me gasping. The unspoken betrayal, the unsaid goodbyes. Do you know what betrayal feels like? It isn't always loud. It isn't always a dramatic, shouted argument, a thrown glass, or a slamming door. Sometimes it's the quiet ache in your chest when someone you trusted someone you gave your whole heart to, chooses another person over you without a single word. Jason and I never had an official breakup. We never sat down and had a conversation where he told me it was over. He just stopped being mine. The phone calls stopped. The texts went unanswered. The late night walks ended. It was a silent, deliberate erasure, as if I had never existed in the first place. And Claire, the girl I shared every secret with, the girl who had a key to my house and a place in my family, didn't even look me in the eyes when she told me she was sorry. Her apology felt hollow, a cheap excuse she'd memorized to get through the awkwardness. It felt like she was apologizing for the mess she had made, not for the hurt she had caused. I still remember the look on her face, a mix of guilt and triumph, a kind of sad, knowing smile that said, I won. It was in that moment that I realized our friendship was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion I had believed in for years. The betrayal was so deep, so complete, that I couldn't even find the words to express it. Fast forward 2 years, 2 long, empty years spent trying to heal, trying to move on from a heartbreak that never got a proper ending, a heartbreak that felt like an open wound that never quite closed. I got the wedding invitation in the mail. My name was etched in a fancy looping font on a thick, cream-colored card, but it felt like an indictment, a mockery of all the plans and promises we had once shared. At first, I ripped it into 1,000 tiny, angry pieces, my heart a hurricane of rage and pain. Then I taped it back together with trembling hands, because some part of me, a small, stubborn, foolish part, couldn't believe it was real. Jason, marrying Claire, the man who once held my hand in the dusty library and said I was the love of his life, the man who told me he'd never met anyone like me, was marrying my best friend. The absurdity of it was too much to bear. On the wedding day, I almost didn't go. I stood in my closet, staring at the dress I had bought, a dark, elegant thing that felt like a funeral shroud. The air in my apartment felt heavy with a sense of dread, but curiosity and maybe a desperate, masochistic need to see the truth for myself pushed me there. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know if this nightmare was real. I sat in a pew near the back, a stranger in a sea of his family and her friends, the flowers in the church, a suffocating cloud of perfume. I watched him stand at the altar, his back to me, the man I loved, the man I lost, waiting for the woman who stole him. And then she appeared, walking down the aisle, her face a mask of radiant, unforgivable joy. The music swelled. He turned, and our eyes met for just a second. The world seemed to stop. The music faded. The laughter died. And in that moment, in the brief, silent space between heartbeats, I swear, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret. It wasn't long. It wasn't obvious to anyone else. It was a split-second change in the light, a barely perceptible shift in the corners of his mouth, a flash of something that looked like sorrow, but I knew him. I knew the way he looked when he was telling me a secret. I knew the way his eyes would go dark when he was deep in thought. And I knew some part of him, a part that he had buried and silenced, wondered what could have been if he had been brave enough to choose me. But here's the cruel part, the brutal, unromantic truth that Hollywood movies never show you. Love doesn't always win. Life isn't about who you loved first. It's not a fairy tale. It's about who someone chooses in the end, about the choice that they make and the life that they build. And Jason chose her. He chose the easy path, the more comfortable, less complicated love. He chose the one who was right there, the one who was convenient, the one who didn't ask for him to grow. He chose her. After the ceremony, Claire, her face glowing with a radiant, unforgivable joy, hugged me with tears in her eyes. Her hug felt like a kind of cruel pity, a final, victorious embrace from a friend who had won the prize. She held me for a moment, her breath smelling of champagne and roses, and she whispered, her voice a soft, sympathetic murmur, I hope you find someone who loves you even more than he loves me. The words, meant to be kind, felt like a deliberate blow, a taunt, a final twist of the knife. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I was the one who was loved first. I wanted to tell her that she was a thief who stole my happiness, because deep down, in the most wounded, vulnerable part of my soul, I didn't believe that was possible. I didn't believe anyone could love me more than he once had. But walking away from that wedding, with mascara running down my face and my heart shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, I realized something. Sometimes the people we love the most aren't meant to be ours. They're meant to be a lesson. They're meant to teach you that not every story has a happy ending. And maybe, just maybe, that's the hardest lesson of all. It's a painful, quiet truth that you carry with you for the rest of your life. The memory of a love that was stolen, the memory of a friendship that was a lie, and the knowledge that sometimes the love you thought would last forever is just a stepping stone on someone else's journey to their happy ending. It's the silent grief of knowing you were never the destination, only the journey. So here I am, still asking myself, did Jason really love me? Or was I just the stepping stone that led him to her? Was I just a safe place, a practice run, a temporary comfort on his way to his true love? And what would you have done in my place? Walked away sooner or fought for him until the very end? Because for me, Walking away was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. The silence of my empty life is a constant reminder that I lost not one person but two on that day, and I'll be carrying that memory for the rest of my life.